Welcome to St. Luke's Health Now, a show dedicated to giving you the most up-to-date information on cutting-edge medicine. I'm your host, Ashley Russo, and we have an exciting show in store for you. We're talking about personalized cancer care and the role of targeted gene therapy with a panel of amazing experts. We'll be hearing patient stories of success and joined by a live studio audience. Stay tuned. This is St. Luke's Health Now. Coming up on today's episode of Health Now, an in-depth look at cancer clinical trials and targeted gene therapy with St. Luke's University Health Network. Stay tuned. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. We have an incredible panel of guests today on Health Now. Joining me first is Dr. Lee Riley. He's a board-certified and fellowship-trained surgical oncologist with a focus on breast cancer. Dr. Riley has introduced many medical advances in his time at St. Luke's, such as sentinel lymph node surgery, advanced genomic testing, and intraoperative radiation therapy for breast cancer. He's published papers in each of these areas and is a strong advocate for clinical trials in breast cancer. Take a look at Dr. Riley.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lee Riley. I'm the chairman of oncology at St. Luke's University Health Network. I want to study the human immune system so that we can beat cancer. I love everything that I do. I love taking care of patients. I love the research. You learn to listen to the patient and try to hear and understand their story, because while I may see everybody with a breast cancer, they're all different. I try to thank all of my patients for trusting me to take care of them. So I think developing the relationship and helping them make good decisions for themselves is important, and that takes trust.
Dr. Riley, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Ashley.
You know, this is a complicated subject, so before we dig in, I think that maybe for our audience here tonight and for our viewers at home, we should get a better understanding of some of the terminology that we'll hear on today's show.
Okay, good idea.
All right, first of all, what is a clinical trial?
So a clinical trial is when we're trying to figure out if one treatment is better than another treatment or it's a new treatment. So it's a study, it's scientifically done, there are ethic panels that look at whether it's responsible, et cetera.
So it's not just a comparison of two items, you know, in your kitchen or in your lab. This
correct.
Is really...
And there's a lot of science and a lot of statistics that go into it, because by the time you're trying to do some sort of an experiment in humans, you want to have all the safety checks. You don't want to put anybody in jeopardy, but you want to find the next advance, and you don't want to delay that.
We hear a lot about phases in clinical trials. Explain to us what, like a phase 1, phase 2, what those are and what the differences are.
So particularly like if you're starting out with a new drug, it's been tested through everything that we can do outside of a human. So laboratory test, animal test, safety test, all of that. And you want to get it into a human for the first time. And you think you know what the side effects are going to be, but you don't know. So you try to take a group of patients that could potentially benefit, for example, cancer patients who have failed other therapies, and you ask them to participate. But the study is designed in a phase 1 to really find out if there are any, what's the right dose, so you start out a very low dose where you think maybe too low, and then you build that dose up to find out what's the maximum tolerated dose. And then you try to find the right range.
And when does a patient move into phase 2 of a clinical trial?
So in the phase 1, they'll only have like a limited number of patients to try to get to that range, but they think they figure out what it is. And then in a phase 2, you're trying to see now that maybe this drug is effective, they think, based on earlier work, for breast cancer or lung cancer. So you'll get a group of patients where you think you might see a response, and then you'll give them the drug at a dose that you think works, and you'll measure the response. So now you're looking for, is the drug really as promising as we thought it would be?
And going on to phases 3 and 4, what can we expect there?
So then in phase 3 is when you've figured out, yes, it's active, and we think it's really good, but we have to prove that it's better than what we're using today. And in that case, you get a group of patients and you basically flip a coin, And some of the patients get the standard treatment, and some of the patients get the new experimental treatment. And then you compare them to try to prove that, yes, drug A is definitely better than drug B.
It's certainly a long process with a lot of detail work along the way, but I guess it's good to know that when you get to that point of a drug being approved, it really is safe and ready to go on the market.
Yes, and that sort of gets to the phase 4s where now the drug's approved, but they're still keeping track. So maybe after they've done 100 or 1,000 patients, but as it gets into more, all of that data is still kept to always try to keep a good safety eye on it.
We've heard a lot about genetic testing for breast cancer, but how is targeted gene therapy different, and why is it important?
Before, chemotherapy for cancer has been trying to find a toxin or a poison that was specific for cancer. But really, it was really just sort of targeting cells that divided faster, which is why hair cells which divide fast, you lose your hair, or you get nauseous because your stomach cells divide fast. But it's not really hitting the cancer because it doesn't have a specific cancer target. So targeted therapy, now that they've done the Human Genome Project, is they're finding out what's actually causing the cancer to be a cancer, and then developing a drug that would target that gene mutation or that specific thing in the cancer that no other normal cell should have. So it's much more active at killing the cancer cell with much fewer side effects. And we're finding out really great results.
Great. Dr. Riley, thank you so much. We're going to have our next panelist join you now.
Great, thanks.
Joining our panel next is Dr. Tricia Kelly. She's a dedicated breast surgeon who specializes in the treatment of breast cancer. Dr. Kelly works closely with a multidisciplinary team of providers. She has also been an invited speaker at national conferences. She served on the executive committee and board of directors for the American Society of Breast Surgeons, as well as serving as chair of the education committee, where she helped develop guidelines for the performance and practice of breast surgery. In addition, Dr. Kelly volunteers with our local cancer support community and is an advocate for women's health care.
I'm Dr. Tricia Kelly. I'm a breast surgical oncologist from St. Luke's University Health Network. I got into medicine because I was always into science, and I realized I really liked taking care of people and the human interaction. Technology is rapidly advancing, so that's very exciting. And at St. Luke's, we do have some very novel techniques. As a network, we are a very friendly network, and I think we have that. We have that as colleagues working with one another, and we approach our patients and their families in the same manner.
Welcome, Dr. Kelly. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Ashley.
So we've started to hear this term, personalized medicine. What is that exactly?
So it's really looking at the individual as a whole and looking at the type of cancer they have and the different features, and working with the group of physicians, you mentioned, the multidisciplinary team, and coming up with a treatment plan. In the past, often it was a one-size-fits-all, so depending on the type of cancer you had, it was the same treatment for anybody who, for example, had breast cancer who maybe was at a younger age. We did the same thing for every woman who fit that mold. Now we look at the type of cancer, we can look at specialized features, we can look at maybe other medical problems that maybe they would or wouldn't tolerate certain treatments, and we come up with treatments that will benefit the patient and not cause harm. So as Dr. Riley was talking about earlier, that toxic therapy and trying to direct the chemo to the cells that need to be targeted rather than non-discriminatorily just killing hair cells and stomach cells. So coming up with a plan that is personalized to you and the type of cancer and the features of your cancer.
It's such a promising and really a positive approach to cancer, I would think, for patients. What's your role as the surgeon in personalized medicine?
I mean, for me, specifically in the breast cancer arena, I can even take it back a step further now to the screening and diagnosis. So we look at breast screening. We know that screening mammography is still the single most effective tool for screening. We're looking at different types of breast tissue and what type of screening tools work. And here at St. Luke's, we have really every type of screening tool available to us. So one woman might have a tissue that benefits from standard mammograms. Another woman might not really benefit from that. So we want to look at that and figure out, where we need to focus on even screening women so we're diagnosing cancer at a much earlier stage. So that's definitely one area where I intervene. And then once the patients are diagnosed, it's me working along with the other team of doctors, such as the medical oncologists, radiation doctors, and coming up with the best plan that fits them and their cancer and the features that we are seeing expressed in their particular cancer.
We're talking more today a little bit about this genomic testing. Is that something that you order, and what is the process and what role do you play in it?
I do order that. So genomic testing allows us to look at further expression of a cancer. So we could hypothetically both have a breast cancer that looks like it's the same type under the microscope, but we can study the proteins or genes that encode for those proteins and see that it's a whole different cancer. And so my treatment that would benefit me might not benefit you. So we can do different types of panels, a lot of them are commercially available, to look at whether or not you would benefit from, for example, chemotherapy. And if you benefit from that, we want to know that, we want to offer that to you. If you're not going to benefit from it, then maybe we're going to do a certain type of an oral targeted therapy. Some of the genomic testing that we do actually feeds into clinical trials, so we can see other targets that might not specifically be the first line treatment that we would use, and we can get that patient then fed into a clinical trial. I do order that as a surgeon. I work closely with my medical oncologist. My primary office, which is in Allentown, I share the same space. The medical oncologist and I are in that space together. So we can have a conversation. I can be thinking about something. I can run it by them. And I'll go ahead and I'll order that testing. I'll tell the patient what I'm ordering, why, what to expect with the results, and inform them when they meet with the medical oncologist. The benefit is they will have that test there in front of them, and they can have all of the information they need for an upfront consult, so they can leave that office with a treatment plan. If I didn't order that, then they would come in, they would meet with the medical oncologist. He would potentially recommend some genomic testing. They go home, they're still not sure what the treatment plan is. They have to wait another 2, potentially 3 weeks to get the testing, come back in. So it expedites the care.
Absolutely streamlines it, and it sounds like it's really a wonderful example of collaboration within the St. Luke's University
Definitely.
Health Network.
Definitely.
Dr. Kelly, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Can I introduce our next panelists? Dr. Sanjeev Agarwala will be joining us. He's the Chief of Hematology and Oncology for St. Luke's University Health Network. He's an internationally recognized investigator in the field of melanoma and immunotherapy. He's well published and serves on the editorial boards of several journals, including the Journal for Clinical Oncology. Dr. Agarwala has led promising clinical trials in immunotherapy and targeted therapy in melanoma. Dr. Agarwala.
My name is Dr. Sanjeev Agarwala. I am Chief of Oncology and Hematology at St. Luke's Cancer Center and St. Luke's Health Network. I'm a melanoma specialist. Melanoma is a tough cancer when it spreads, and I think the most important thing I can do for a cancer patient is to really inform them about their disease. I literally approach it like I'm teaching them like I would teach a student. So we've discovered that certain cancers, like melanoma for example, have certain specific gene mutations that you can target with certain drugs. So I think that the future of cancer really is going to be a very much more personalized approach.
Dr. Agarwala, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
We've heard a lot about targeted therapy, and this is a new approach to medicine. Can you explain for us exactly what that means?
So we've always treated cancer by giving patients drugs that historically have been chemicals, and they poison the patient and they poison the cancer. And the hope is that it's poisoning the cancer more than the patient. And that's why we have side effects of treatment. And this has been an approach that's been relatively successful, but obviously, as you can imagine, it's a fairly crude approach. So what we really want to do is to find the cancer cell and target that and save every other cell so the patient has no side effects, and therefore you can use drugs that are really effective. So
Makes sense.
targeted therapy is a way to find those cells and to to treat those cancer cells specifically. And it's based upon the principle that cancer cells are different in some way than your normal cells, so to speak. And that can be from various things, such as a genetic mutation that is usually acquired. It's not something that you transmit from, within families, but the tumor mutates, it becomes foreign. There's a mutation, and if that mutation is the driver of that cancer cell, so to speak, there's a machine in that cell that's making that cell stay alive forever, divide, multiply. If you can find the gene that's making that machine go, and you can find a drug that shuts that machine off, then it's going to work and it's going to treat that cancer very successfully. So that is really what targeted therapy is.
That really is so amazing, and it's a differentiation for people to understand that there's genetic testing that would see possibly what is in your family history.
Correct.
And then this is genetic therapy that's targeting the actual cancer within the tumor itself.
Correct. So here you're looking for a gene that's within the cancer cell or cancer cells that's driving that cancer. Whereas gene testing is a little bit different. That's where you may determine someone's predisposition to get cancer or to have certain kinds of cancer and so on. And then gene therapy is even more different. And gene therapy is actually when you're taking genes itself and using them as drugs. And we've done that in non-cancer things as well. But in cancer as well, we know that there are certain genes that are deficient in cancer cells. So when you think about a cancer cell, there's a genetic balance in that cell between making it go and making it stop. So if the genes that are making it go aren't there, or they're there too much, maybe you can use gene therapies to shut that down. Or if there's not enough genes to make it do something, you can add it in there too. So that's a little bit different.
We heard in your introduction a lot of the word immunotherapy. What is that, and why is that sort of an exciting and important new treatment for cancer?
So the immune system is very important. Everyone knows that it's there to fight infections. And what makes an infection fightable by the immune system is that it's foreign. So when you think about a cancer cell within your body, it is a mutated cell, so it's actually in a way foreign, but yet it's part of you. And the immune system is out there. There's cells in the immune system that are literally patrolling the body to find these cells and destroy them, but it's not been that successful for many reasons. One is that the cancer cell is very smart. It finds a way to hide from the immune system. And the other thing that happens is that our immune systems are always geared to keep working, and we're out there looking for these antigens. And believe it or not, there's a T cell, which is a kind of an immune cell in your body right now that is already programmed to react to every known and unknown antigen in the universe. It's there, ready to go. So it finds that antigen and it starts working, but it has to shut down, because if it didn't shut down, we would have immune problems, like autoimmune disease is an example of that. So the brakes come on the immune system. So the new immunotherapies and using the immune system to fight cancer has been exciting recently, because we have discovered what those brakes are on the immune system that turn it off too soon, perhaps. Take those brakes away, that immune system keeps going. I like to give the analogy of a car, where the car starts by having a key put in the ignition. That's your antigen being recognized by the T cell, by that immune cell. Step on the gas, which is a signal that the immune system gives to get it going, but then the brakes come on. So the new immunotherapies are taking those brakes away, allowing that car to keep moving. And some of these immunotherapies are not only taking the brakes away, but they're filling the gas tank as well to get the car keep moving.
So is this how medical oncologists use this information to treat and personalize cancer treatments?
Yeah, so immunotherapy is personalized in a way that we're targeting certain pathways in the immune system. But the beauty about immunotherapy is that it's not necessarily a personalized treatment specifically for that person. It's a way to give that person new tools that they already have. So I like to talk about it with my patients as a natural way of treating cancer, where you're going to do the work for me. I'm going to give you some tools that are going to make you fight your own cancer. And the other thing about immunotherapy that's exciting is the effects can be long-lasting, and we don't see that with other treatments, for example, because if you're giving someone a new immune system that's more powerful, that could be a very long-lasting thing, and the hope is that it'll be there forever. So what we've seen in the new cancer treatments that are using immunotherapy, we're seeing sometimes cures, long-term survival, which we never saw before, which you could almost never get with a chemical poison.
It's very promising and wonderful way to look at it. Makes a lot of sense, I think, for myself, certainly our audience, and hopefully our viewers at home. We've learned a lot. There's so much more. So stay tuned. We'll be back after a short break. You're watching St. Luke's Health Now.
Meet the faces of St. Luke's cancer survivors. Cancers are complex, unique, and so are the people affected by them. While their journeys may be different, these survivors all have one thing in common. They all chose St. Luke's Cancer Center, where they received amazing state-of-the-art care. Be inspired by our survivors' stories. Learn how they beat cancer with the best. St. Luke's.
Welcome back, and thanks for watching St. Luke's Health Now. I'm Ashley Russo, and I'm joined by an excellent panelist of guests today, Dr. Lee Riley, Dr. Tricia Kelly, Dr. Sanjeev Agarwala. They've walked us through some of the most important points related to targeted therapy and cancer care. We also want to thank our audience for being here today and providing us with such insightful questions, and to our patient participants in the audience whose stories you'll be hearing throughout the show. Our panel is not quite complete. We have two more panelists to join us, and up next is Tracy Butrin. She's the Director of Clinical Trials and Research at St. Luke's University Health Network. Ms. Butrin holds a Master of Science degree in experimental psychology, and after joining St. Luke's in 2012, she developed their centralized clinical trials office. Tracy is also the co-director of the postdoctoral research program and the Associate Director of Regulatory Affairs.
My name is Tracy Butrin. I am the Director of Clinical Trials and Research at St. Luke's University Health Network. We've always taken pride in, personalizing our care for our patients. With the advances in our treatment options for our cancer patients, we're able to personalize that in terms of their treatment as well. I love research, I love learning, and I feel like it's a career where you're continually learning, and all of that learning then gets generalized into the general public with new treatments for patients, and oncology is a great example of one of those areas where we have just really advanced in our treatment options through the research process.
Tracy, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get into the nuts and bolts of clinical trials, can you tell us what the word randomization means and why it's important in a clinical trial?
Sure. So what randomization is referring to is the way that patients are assigned to the different groups within the clinical trial. It's done randomly, just like the name says, basically like a flip of a coin. So, for example, they can be randomized into the treatment group where they would be receiving the investigational product, or a control group where they would be receiving possibly standard of care therapy or another potential type of therapy. It's very important because basically it removes the bias of assigning patients to different groups. And it also controls for different confounding factors or irrelevant variables. For example, if you think about if you are testing the outcomes of college students taking an exam, if all of the college students in one group are fatigued and tired, they were out the night before, and all of those people end up in the same group because they weren't randomly assigned, that would have an effect on the outcome of that study.
That makes a lot of sense. And the patients are not aware of what group they are in or what drug they're being given. Is that correct?
That's correct. Sometimes, depending.
So you were very instrumental in helping develop this clinical trials office. Tell me a little bit about what makes this team unique.
I think what makes it unique is that we're a centralized office, and we are comprised of a very stratified group of individuals who are experts in all different areas of the clinical trials process. We have a team of research nurses who are really experienced in the treatment that they are involved in and the care of the patients, and we have administration staff that are involved in all of the other aspects of clinical trials. So this stratification allows our team to really dedicate themselves to what they're good at and be there for our patients.
It's important for people to know that there is this team approach, and when you see one person, you're really seeing a multitude of people in the process.
That's right.
Without having to go to too many visits, correct?
That's right.
How are trials made available to patients, and how would they find out about them or to even know if they're a candidate?
Sure. So we're constantly opening new trials all the time. We are always evaluating our portfolio of trials, proactively identifying any gaps in our treatment types, and we're being approached all the time because of our physicians having such great relationships out there that we are always being approached with new potential trials to open.
Excellent. Thank you, Tracy. This is such great information. Our final panelist today is Dr. David Anderson, the chairman of the pathology department at St. Luke's University Health Network, a position he has held for 12 years. Dr. Anderson works closely with the doctors Agarwala, Riley, and the entire cancer care team to find cancer. He can look for cells anywhere in the body and then properly test them using the latest techniques. These test results guide the treatment of patients throughout the network.
Hello, I'm David Anderson, and I'm chairman of our Department of Pathology here at St. Luke's. In pathology, we try to help the surgeon and the internal medicine doctor and all the cancer team with this simple question: does this person have cancer? Some things haven't changed. You have to treat the person first. We're all a little different. But the number of options, the number of ways we can treat a cancer in a given person has exploded. It's a real privilege to work with so many talented members of our cancer care team.
Dr. Anderson, thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure, Ashley.
So often we associate pathology with maybe biopsy results or blood work that we get, or if you watch a lot of TV, you might think that you're always with dead bodies, but what does a pathologist really do?
The pathologist is the doctor's doctor. So all my colleagues here who are doctors can't see as small as we can. We need to see that small because your body is comprised of billions of cells, and we know that the behavior of those cells is key to understanding disease, and in particular cancer.
Can you explain for us how cancer cells work?
Cancer cells begin as your own cells that aren't cancer. To give you an idea of how small these cells are, 200 of them stacked one on top of the other equals the thickness of your fingernail. So you can imagine that as you've grown up, literally billions of cells have had to grow to make you. In the growth, they have to behave themselves. So a cancer cell is a cell which, for a variety of reasons, either it's growing too fast or the fix-it proteins have not done their job. That cell is now starting to grow in a way that invades other parts of that tissue, or gets into the bloodstream and travels to distant parts of your body, and then it starts growing there.
You talked about collaboration and being the doctor's doctor. How does St. Luke's work together for the best care and patient outcomes?
Over the years, it's become evident, beginning in our tumor boards and then ending up in what we call disease management teams, that the body is so complex, and in fact cancer itself is so complex, that it needs dedicated certain type of cancer teams to keep up with the latest in advances in both finding cancer, characterizing what is wrong and what can be targeted by therapy, delivering surgical cures and medical cures, and participating in clinical trials so that we can't ever say to a patient, we're not offering you the state-of-the-art options for your therapy.
You mentioned looking at billions of cells. How does finding and identifying those specific cancer cells lead to this personalized cancer care?
Well, we first have to find them, and the radiologist is very key to this. They, through scanning parts of their body, they can identify things that don't look right to them. But the radiologist can't see the cell. They can get pretty small, but they can't see the cell. It's far too small. So the radiologist then has to take a bit of tissue at the location that doesn't look right, and he gives that to the pathologist. So we can apply all those stains to these cells and color them, so to speak, and then say, aha, there's a cancer cell, and not only is it a cancer cell, but it has this mistake which Dr. Agarwala knows how to treat, because he can target that mistake.
Dr. Anderson, thank you so much for that information, and thank you to everyone on the panel for giving us your expertise and sharing it in a way that we can understand and really see collaboration at work at St. Luke's. We appreciate that. Stay tuned. We'll be back after the break. You're watching St. Luke's Health Now.
Life can get pretty busy. From homework to housework to managing everyone's schedules, my family depends on me and I want to be there for them. I try to follow a healthy lifestyle, but I also knew I needed to fit in my first mammogram. Annual mammograms offer the best chance to find breast cancers earlier and the best chance for successful treatment. Hi, I'd like to make an appointment.
Law Journal will return next week. Here is more with St. Luke's Health Now.
I was diagnosed in 2008 with multiple myeloma.
Melanoma was diagnosed at stage 4.
I am stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer. I went 3 rounds of treatment, the third round being a clinical trial because the first 2 were not the results they wanted to see. So I now am in the maintenance phase, which I will remain in until my body tells me otherwise.
I had to do something, and the treatment worked out well. It's fantastic, and it's still going well.
The doctors and nurses at St. Luke's are wonderful.
To get me on that trial and to get me started, they saved my life. They go above and beyond to answer every single question.
I enjoy going to St. Luke Hospital. They're all great people. I'm at home when I go there.
I don't think you can get any better doctors or nurses around this area. St. Luke's is #1 in my books.
Welcome back to St. Luke's Health Now. I'm your host, Ashley Russo. A special thank you to our audience members and especially our patient survivors for sharing their stories with us. I'm joined today by a wonderful panel. Dr. Lee Riley, Medical Director of Oncology, Dr. Tricia Kelly, Breast Surgeon, Dr. Sanjeev Agarwala, Chief of Oncology and Hematology, Tracy Butrin, Director of Clinical Trials and Research, and Dr. David Anderson, Chief of Pathology. Thank you all so much for being here. In the first part of the program, we established some of the guidelines and vocabulary for clinical trials and targeted gene therapy. So I'd like to dig a little deeper now and open these questions up to the panel. Dr. Agarwala, I'm going to start with you. How are clinical trials a key part of our success in fighting cancer?
I'd like to tell people that every drug we use today in medicine was once a clinical trial. Without clinical trials, we wouldn't be anywhere.
Excellent point.
Yeah, and I think, clinical trials are a way to provide what's best that we know of today with hopefully something that will be better tomorrow. So when we do clinical trials, we either add something more to what's standard or compare a current standard to what might be a better treatment. That's how we do it. There's different designs of clinical trials.
So what is the standard is not always the wrong answer. We're just looking for more.
Correct, because obviously we don't have a 100% cure rate in cancer. The day we do, we can all go home, right?
Absolutely.
But until then, we have to make progress, as we often have, in small increments, and that is with clinical trials.
Tracy, you run the clinical trials department, which I would imagine would be a complicated job. What sort of resources does St. Luke's have that help you do your job well?
So we have a very diverse team in our clinical trials office handling all aspects of the clinical trial process. And we're very well integrated into the cancer center where our physicians really think of clinical trials as a treatment option for our patients. We have a great portfolio of trials, and if for any reason we didn't have the right trial that would perfectly fit one of our patients, we really have great connections across other major institutions that our physicians are well connected with.
Right, so we have, as Tracy mentioned, an excellent portfolio of our own trials, which are run at St. Luke's. But there are many centers around the world that we collaborate with, and the idea is to find the best treatment that fits the patient. That's what personalized care is. So we collaborate with centers all around the country and sometimes around the world. We have collaborations in terms of clinical trials, sending patients to centers such as Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York, University of Pennsylvania, MD Anderson, all the large centers. And this, again, as Tracy mentioned, is from our connections and our collaborations that we are able to look and see what we have, and if it's something good or better elsewhere, we'll make that happen too.
So you're really working for the good of that individual patient, regardless of where that trial exists.
We're all in this together, in terms
Absolutely.
of cancer treatments, and us clinicians that do clinical trials. We meet frequently. We go to conferences. We almost know everything what everyone's doing, but we're able to pick up the phone and contact someone and find out what's the current and what the best treatment might be for that patient.
And I would guess that everyone who's invested in cancer research wants all cancer trials to succeed because that helps all patients in the long run.
Absolutely. We build on the building blocks of other people all the time.
Dr. Anderson, how do clinical trials help this personalized cancer care? We heard about the ones going on at St. Luke's, but how in general does that help?
No one hospital, no one researcher, no one physician knows the answer to treatment of all cancers. So we have to be a community. And just as Tracy and Dr. Agarwala mentioned, we also in the laboratory have a very large network of expert physicians and researchers across the world. When we don't know what we're seeing, we send that for an expert opinion, maybe to Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, maybe to Johns Hopkins, maybe to MD Anderson. And they have tests that they're developing there that are on the cutting edge, which we wouldn't even know about. Sometimes these results aren't even published, and they can help our patients. So when the clinical trial group asks us to support their participation, we are the people that send the cancer cells to where Tracy wants them sent.
It's amazing to see that a place like St. Luke's University Health Network here in the Lehigh Valley is participating in clinical trials and working with major medical institutions all across America. Dr. Riley, when do you refer a patient to a clinical trial? When is that an option?
Hopefully it's always an option, because the more people we put on trials, the faster we're going to advance the knowledge to cure cancer. So it starts at the time of diagnosis when I get a report from Dr. Anderson. We will see if there's something unusual about a tumor that might fit a clinical trial. Very frequently now, particularly in breast cancer, it may be more important to give chemotherapy before we even operate. So Dr. Kelly and I pay attention to what Dr. Agarwala and his team are looking at to see if maybe we can see if a drug works before we take it out, so we can see it shrink, and then we know we have a faster answer than waiting 10 years to see if it comes back. So as the surgeons, we're always looking at opportunities to help figure out whether drugs work faster or better. And we also use clinical trials in surgery. So like Dr. Agarwala was saying earlier, to combine them or compare them, we used to do a radical mastectomy, which was a very morbid operation. And then we've gone through clinical trials to a modified radical, to a simple mastectomy, to a lumpectomy, and maybe just taking out one lymph node. So it's not just for medical oncology, but it's for all ways of treating cancer.
Well, you might have answered my next question, but Dr. Kelly, you're in the operating room, and as a surgeon, how are these personalized medicine approaches and clinical trials helping you in your job?
Well, I mean, some Dr. Riley alluded to, it's not just the medical oncology, what are the new targeted therapies. Some of it's different options for surgery. Some of the technologies we collaborate with a radiation oncologist. So we do have a novel type of radiation therapy here at St. Luke's. It's the only one in the area where you can have your lumpectomy and your radiation all in one setting.
What a great option for patients.
It is. It's not for everybody. We do offer that to select patients that we know based on a clinical trial that we can safely offer that to them. We look at genetic testing. We talked about genetic testing earlier and how that's different from maybe gene therapy or immunotherapy, looking at family histories and whether or not there's an abnormal gene, and based on that, that will guide the treatment options I would recommend to a patient.
Dr. Kelly, you're mentioning sort of all of the factors that go into this decision. Dr. Agarwala, how does a patient know if a clinical trial is a good fit for them? I would imagine there's some fear and concern that goes into it, and when can they decide this is right for me?
It's a great question because, obviously there's a fear of being a guinea pig, so to speak, where you're being experimented on. And I think a couple of things people, realize now, there's no clinical trial that anyone in this country at least does that's not being closely regulated, has been thought of and discussed by the best minds in that field. So there's certainly some comfort there. In general, though, as we've discussed, if you have a standard treatment that works well, you certainly want to do that. Often people come to us for clinical trials when they've failed, if you will. The treatment hasn't worked, or it's worked for a while and then it's not working anymore. and there's no good standard option left. So that's a no-brainer. That's a place where a clinical trial would work as well. But even if you have a standard treatment, adding to that, making it better is our goal. And as mentioned by Drs. Riley and Kelly, it starts at the surgical side. The surgeon is often the first person that meets a cancer patient, and if they are going to introduce the topic of clinical trials as an option, that makes it much more palatable when we get them later on. And I would also like to add that they've talked about how surgical clinical trials refine surgical techniques, make surgeries better, but there's also this new move of using that tumor prior to removing it to stimulate the immune system. There's injectable treatments now. We do some treatments at St. Luke's on clinical trials and outside of clinical trials where we inject certain drugs or even gene therapies into tumors prior to removal, making that tumor your friend before you take it out. Let that tumor stimulate that immune system in that patient because those antigens are already there. Take that tumor out anyway, and then have a long-term effect of those antigens stimulating that immune system. That's another approach we're looking at.
I would call that thinking outside the box to the max.
Indeed.
Tracy, we're talking about all these clinical trials. What kinds of trials are available at St. Luke's?
We have a wide range of clinical trials at St. Luke's, crossing almost every, if not every, type of cancer. We have all different lines of clinical trials as well, whether it's first-line therapy or, as Dr. Agarwala touched on, they've already failed all of those standard therapies and maybe it's a second-line treatment or a third-line treatment. We're always looking at our portfolio of trials as well to make sure we try to proactively identify any gaps in there and identify new trials to fill those gaps so that we can offer the best treatments available to our patients.
Dr. Anderson, what kind of advancements have happened in pathology that have allowed this type of medicine to continue, this personalized medicine, targeted gene therapy? As you mentioned, it all starts with the cell.
Well, cells are small, so most of the advancements have come in keeping track of very, very small things. And I think I would do an injustice if I didn't credit the microelectronics revolution of the 90s in producing smart chips that power your cell phones. We now can put molecules on chips. I also have to credit the amazing speed with which computers can do billions of calculations. So with this technology as a background, then, the Human Genome Project allowed us to say this is how each gene, and you have 22,000 of them in your body, in every cell of your body, 22,000 genes. This is how this gene should be structured. And a computer can keep track of that. I certainly couldn't. And we can then take the genes from your cancer cells. We have to find them first, preserve them, treat them right, then we can get their DNA. And we can ask that DNA, how are you different from how each of these genes should look? Now, we don't do that for 22,000 genes. We do that for subsets of those genes, maybe 600-700 genes that are often identified as making cancer cells misbehave.
It's amazing technology and a wonderful use of it here at St. Luke's University Health Network. Thank you all for such an in-depth and informative conversation. Stick with us. You're watching St. Luke's Health Now.
I've always been a planner. Our finances, vacations, everyday dinner. But when it came to my health and I really needed it, St. Luke's had a plan. They worked with me to make informed choices that make the most sense for my type of cancer. They call it personalized medicine. I call it amazing. Know your options, influence your future.
Welcome back to St. Luke's Health Now. I'm your host, Ashley Russo. A special thank you to our audience members and our patient survivors for sharing their stories with us. And of course to our wonderful panel here, Dr. Riley, Dr. Kelly, Dr. Agarwala, Tracy Butrin, and Dr. Anderson. We've had a really good discussion on clinical trials, cancer care, targeted gene therapy. Now we want to take some questions from our studio audience. We've got quite a few here. I'm going to sort of pick these at random, but we've got one here. Someone in the audience has taken 3 different targeted therapies that aren't working. Why have they failed, and will immunotherapy ever take the place of conventional chemotherapy?
So targeted therapies are, they would work at least for a while, and sometimes they stop working. And the main reason for that is because the cancer is very smart and it mutates. So that particular target may disappear, or the cell becomes resistant to that drug. So you try another targeted therapy and you keep going that way if you can find another target. The hope with immunotherapies is actually we bypass that process, and with making the immune system your friend to try to fight the cancer with your natural body's defenses, you might be able to eliminate the cancer that way. So unfortunately, we have a long way to go. Targeted therapies have been very successful, but the cancer is always often one step ahead of us, and potentially the future might be combining targeted therapies with immunotherapies down the road.
For anyone on the panel, this audience member would like to know, will there be immunotherapies for all types of cancers, and will it be available at a community hospital like St. Luke's?
I think the answer is probably yes. 30 years ago I did my PhD on immunotherapy, and I think we all saw it coming. But it was because we could cure cancer in animals. And then over the last 2 decades, we've started to see being able to cure cancer or make cancer never come back for 15, 20 years. And we've really been building a center of excellence on immunotherapy here. So now we have immunotherapy clinical trials on a huge portfolio on melanoma and renal cell. We've got them head and neck.
So it's coming, slowly building it.
And we just, go ahead.
No, I was going to say we do have it, and as Dr. Riley said, we are a community hospital, but we have an academic side that's very important, and a lot of people don't know that we have treatments here, right here in the Valley, that we are expert in. We've been doing it for decades, and other people don't have them. I do believe that eventually immunotherapy will be a treatment for every kind of cancer.
Absolutely. So while St. Luke's has maintained the community feel, they are a university health network participating in all kinds of clinical trials.
Yeah.
So Trish, I'm going to ask this for you. An audience member asks, what are your thoughts on the new recommendations for breast cancer screening?
The guidelines have changed. They've evolved over time. As I mentioned also, that screening mammography is the most effective screening tool for the early diagnosis of breast cancer. That being said, there are some women, based on their certain tissue characteristics, that maybe the mammogram isn't the best modality for them, or we want to do some ultrasound scanning along with that. Some women who might fall into a certain category where maybe they have a gene mutation, that woman should be having an MRI scan as well. So again, it's really looking at what that person's, what their tissue characteristics are, what's their family history, are there any known gene changes, and coming up with a screening guideline for them as well to hopefully diagnose any potential cancer as early as possible. And we have to look at the general population versus people who may be at higher risk for whatever reason.
So just like we're talking about personalized care as it relates to cancer, there's really personalized care in the screening process as well.
Definitely, yes.
And I'd like to ask Dr. Anderson, do you have thoughts on the importance of nutrition in the survivorship program? Getting down to a cellular level, how important is it to be supported? We talk about health and wellness in the fight against cancer. How important is that?
The last century, vitamins were defined, and vitamins help our cells grow properly. So if you're trying to fight cancer, your cells are working overtime to do that, you've got to give them the right fuel. And consequently, even how well a cancer patient can tolerate various foods needs the guidance of an all-encompassing nutritional for cancer program, so that those vitamins and the proper proteins and minerals are available for those cells.
Great answer. All right, another audience member asks this question. If you release the brakes on the immune system and give it gas, will that lead to side effects such as autoimmune problems?
Excellent question. So yes, the answer is that does happen, and that's where our expertise in immunotherapy comes in, because these treatments require monitoring and for exactly that process. So if that car, you've taken the brakes off and put the gas in, is moving too fast, you got to slow it down. And the way we do that is with steroids in the right dose at the right time for the right duration. And that's very important in immunotherapy. So it's about tweaking the system to make it go just as fast as you want it to go and slowing it down when you need it to.
Great. Another audience member asks this question: why do chemo first before immunotherapy is tried?
Well, one reason is if you're like in breast cancer, we want to see if a new drug works. So if we start chemotherapy and we know how big the tumor is and we see it shrink, we know that drug is working, so go with it. And you can always add immunotherapy on the background. Immunotherapy typically takes a longer time to work. So if you've got a really fast-growing cancer that you want to kill and shrink before it gets next to another organ, chemotherapy might be the way to go.
Okay. Do you have an opinion or interest in the idea of holistic care and cooperation with traditional therapies for cancer?
Sure, I'll take that one. So I actually consider myself to be a holistic provider. And people confuse that with what is perceived as alternative medicine or complementary medicine. So holistic means treating the whole person. And I think we've talked a lot about that we're looking at treating individual patients and offering them particular programs that are going to benefit them and hopefully not give them undue side effects. So as an overall, yes, I do agree that holistic medicine should be part and parcel of everything that we're talking about. There are some things, again, I don't know whoever asked this question if they are referring to a branch called complementary medicine, which means you're doing standard of care along with maybe some other supportive types of therapies, which could be as simple as getting acupuncture for your nausea. That could be secondary to the chemotherapy. And then there's alternative medicine, which you choose alternative paths. So other than these standard of care treatments or things that we are hoping to bring into standard of care through the clinical trials, you might choose to treat it in a different mechanism. So it's really 3 different things to look at.
Great, thank you. Tracy, someone here is wondering if they wanted to get involved with a clinical trial, what would they need to be concerned about?
Well, I think clinical trials are very well run and managed, where there's a very thorough informed consent process. So you are going to meet with somebody from the clinical trials team that will explain everything that's going to be involved as part of your participation. Of course, you want to think about the side effects or of whatever drug is being used, and that would be thoroughly explained to you as part of that informed consent process as well. So it's a voluntary process. It's a decision that you would make after being educated on everything that you would need to know, but that's, again, all part of that process.
So don't be afraid. Go online,
don't
check it out.
Don't be afraid, exactly.
See if you're a candidate.
Exactly.
All right, the next question from someone in the audience: if immunotherapy is the way of the future, how can it become affordable to the general public?
Another good question. So, I think the problem with immunotherapy is that they use proteins that are manufactured by very complicated techniques, and the clinical trials that get these drugs approved are extremely expensive. So there certainly are expensive drugs, no doubt about it. What the hope, at least I see for the future, is the whole field of biosimilars. There's a movement now in its infancy in the United States, but very much advanced in Europe, where biological drugs, such as proteins that are immunotherapies, once they go off patent, can be manufactured by other companies with less work to do, therefore the price would be lower. But it is a problem, no doubt. These are expensive therapies. The good news is that they work so much better than what we had before that in the long run, they could probably save money for the healthcare system, because people will live productive lives and will do things that they were doing before and be productive members of society.
No, that's an excellent point. It makes a lot of sense. The next question we have is: what delivery mechanisms are being used to target the cells?
So there's several mechanisms. There are mechanisms on the surgical end where you can isolate the liver or the leg from a blood supply system and deliver the drug just to that organ. And then there are other ways that you might want to mention.
Well, injecting the tumor, we talked about that. But I think in terms of the nice thing about the drugs that you take orally is that, they go into the bloodstream and they're designed to target those mutations that are causing that cancer or making that cancer grow. And in a way, sometimes you want it to go everywhere, which is the way that we're going to try to cure that patient, because those cancer cells could be anywhere. So in a sense that you want them to go everywhere, but then when they get to their destination, to target the cancer cells. So those drugs are designed to do that. So as Dr. Riley said, it starts, there's a surgical way to do it and a medical way to do it. And the way that those drugs are designed are different, just for the different methods of delivery.
We have another question from an audience member. And this person writes, I understand that immunotherapy has had favorable results in cancers above the waist and some curative for melanoma, but what advances or clinical trials are being done for bladder, kidney, and prostate, and have any studies been done for those cancers that have metastasized to the liver?
We have clinical trials at St. Luke's in bladder cancer and prostate cancer using immunotherapy. And in terms of targeting the liver, so that would depend upon what you mean by that. If it's a liver cancer, a primary liver cancer, we call that hepatocellular carcinoma. There's clinical trial data out there. We don't have a trial at St. Luke's, but there is a trial that has been reported showing some good results with even that kind of cancer. But I want to point out that most cancers in the liver don't start there. They go there from somewhere else, and those will respond to the immunotherapy that is being targeted to the cancer that spread to the liver in the first place. So melanoma going to the liver will respond to melanoma immunotherapy, whether it's in the liver or elsewhere.
So getting to the root cause is really important.
Right.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. We thank our audience for wonderful questions this evening, very insightful. And before we end our show this evening, I'd like to ask each one of you to give us a parting comment on what it is that you are passionate about in your field.
One, you've got to connect with the patient. You can't have all this high technology and science and forget that you're treating a patient. And I think we do a great job, and use the team to do that. I'll just leave that there. See where we go.
Dr. Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, I'm passionate about taking care of patients, and primarily that's women with breast cancer. And I feel like I do have a very good connection with my patients, and I get to know them as individuals, and I know about their families. And I think just kind of having that conversation allows some trust.
Great. Dr. Agarwala?
I want to put myself out of business. I want to find a way that we can cure cancer completely and I can retire.
Wouldn't that be great?
That
would be great. What about you, Tracy?
Just the fact of advancing medicine through clinical trials, bringing new innovative techniques and therapies to the general public, and hopefully one day finding a cure.
Excellent. Dr. Anderson?
I'm passionate about keeping their passions high. If I get them the right information as soon as they need it for each patient individually, then through them, I'm treating that patient too. And that makes me feel good.
Excellent. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us and telling us more about personalized medicine at St. Luke's University Health Network. For more information on clinical trials and personalized medicine at St. Luke's University Health Network, go to their website at sluhn.org. I'm Ashley Russo. This is St. Luke's Health Now. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, be well, and remember, it's important to focus on your health now.